I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة on Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, but discussing Latin America. I'm joined by an audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. Donald Trump notoriously intends to build a wall along the United States southern border with Mexico. Unfortunately, it's a one-way wall. It's a wall to keep the people of Latin America out. Unfortunately, not a wall to keep North America out of Latin America. This is not isolationism, this is interventionism. Donald Trump have embarked on a hostile and aggressive policy which has opened up old wounds and created new wounds. It's taking Latin America back decades from the period of social democratic, even socialist change in Latin America. We now have the re-emergence of the grisly old right-wing regimes involved in all kinds of political and electoral skullduggery. In Brazil, for example, a coup against the former President Dilma has become a second coup against the man who would almost certainly be the next president of Brazil, the former trade union leader Lula, who's now arraigned on trumped-up criminal charges, whose sole purpose is to stop him running in the upcoming presidential elections in Brazil, which he would, by most people's observations, almost certainly win. In Argentina, a right-wing government has again emerged, backing the United States policy of aggression against not only Venezuela, but also Cuba. Just in the last few days, a diplomatic spat broke out between the Organization of American States and the government in Cuba, respected throughout the world, but not, it seems, by those in charge of political events in today's Latin America. Tillerson is involved in the subversion of the Venezuelan government. Even the United States' best friends could not deny that. But Paul Ryan, the lead Republican in the United States Congress, went further. Last weekend, he called for a military coup, a Chilean-style military coup against the government of Venezuela. Elected, re-elected, re-elected, re-elected. In fact, the most elected government in the entire planet. The Paul Ryan plea was for the Venezuelan military to overthrow the elected government and take charge. We've seen that before. In Chile, we saw it, and it bathed the country in blood, murder, torture, and the assassination of the president, the setting ablaze, literally, of the Chilean parliament. That's what Paul Ryan wants to happen in Venezuela. Indeed, is openly calling for it. And if he is calling for it, you can be sure that preparations are underway to try and bring it about. The conflicts between countries like Colombia and Venezuela have been recently re-exacerbated, so much so that the Venezuelan government declared that there was the possibility that Colombia would militarily invade Venezuela. You see the picture here, going back decades, right-wing governments, juntas like the one now in charge in Brazil, and the isolation of any country which seeks to tread its own independent path to development and protect its own sovereignty. So it's a one-way wall that Trump intends to build. Whether he will ever build it is a moot point, but for sure it's one way, because the United States is back in Latin America. We have a distinguished group of experts, so enough from me. Let's go to primus inter pares in the Latin American expert field in Britain, Isaac Baggio. Have I summed up the situation correctly?
Yes, George, I wanted to add something. In April, there is going to be the 8th Pan American Summit in Lima, where the 35 countries of the Latin America, the Caribbean, and North America are going to send their presidents and prime ministers. And for the very first time in the history of the diplomatic movement in Latin America, the Venezuelan president is not allowed to participate in that summit. This is, some person can go to the United Nations, to New York, even if he's against the United States. But the president of Venezuela is not allowed to enter in the summit.
Who made that decision? The government in Lima?
The Peruvian president Kuczynski, no? He said that Venezuela is a dictatorship, but the problem is that Kuczynski is very unpopular. In any moment he's going to be sacked by the parliament. He doesn't have popular support. And he's trying to use the anti-Chavista feeling to try to keep in power. And he's now released Fujimori, who is the most terrible dictator in the history of Peru. He just released from jail in December. So this is a contradiction. But the point is that the decision to exclude Venezuela from the summit is linked with Tillerson's trip into Latin America. In the first week of February, he visited 5 countries in the region, and he openly demanded that the Venezuelan army intervene in politics and to change the government. Already China is the most important foreign trade partner for Chile, Argentina, Peru, etc. No? So the most important thing, I think, now is the idea that have the United States to try to exclude Venezuela from the American summit, and this could create a situation like we have with the Organization of American States some years ago in the 1962, when Cuba was excluded. No? So that is the main issue, I think.
Cuba had a long fight to return to the table
Yes.
of the Latin American countries. Was the spat to which I referred a sign that exclusion of Cuba might also be on their agenda?
Well, in the last summit, which was in Panama 3 Aprils ago, Cuba was allowed to participate, and Obama was with Raúl Castro. But this time, they are trying to exclude Maduro. If Maduro is being excluded, other countries are going to boycott the summit, and Cuba also. So at the end, we might not have a real Pan-American summit, and what we could have is a big confrontation between some countries that would like to overthrow the Venezuelan government, and some countries would like to defend the Venezuelan government, and some countries that want to be in the middle. So we are going into a very difficult circumstances.
It's a very polarized
Yes.
situation that the United States wants to create. Is it just to overthrow pre-existing progressive governments in Latin America, or is it also a warning to everyone else that they should never again think of treading the path of independent development?
Maybe, but yes, but it's also trying to support some government like Kuczynski in Peru, who is deeply unpopular, that the Congress want to sack him, the population is very against him, no? And also try to support Temer in Brazil, who has 5% of popularity. He's quite unpopular. So I think that the agenda is to consolidate a movement toward monetarist neoliberal policies and towards more intervention in the region.
Could this literally slide back into military dictatorship, in Brazil in particular, because the current figurehead president, with 5% of popular support, can clearly not hold the line forever. The popularity of the Workers' Party, and Lula in particular, is growing. And I saw in the news this very day that the military are taking over the security of the carnival in Rio. Is this a straw in the wind that Brazil itself could end up back in military hands?
I think that what we are seeing in Latin America is a kind of militarized democracies. It is now, the coup d'etats are made by the parliament in Honduras, in Brazil, in Paraguay, no? So the idea is, at the moment, is legal coup d'etats with the support of the parliament, but with heavy support by the army. At the moment, the United States is not planning an old-fashioned coup d'etat, but it might change. We already see that Trump is threatening with a nuclear war in Korea, is threatening to stop Iran, and is accelerating the war in Yemen. So we don't know what could be the outcome. But for the moment, his plan is to propose a coup in Venezuela, and is asking the army to overthrow Maduro. No?
Now, on that last point, what kind of shape is the Chavista movement, President Maduro himself, what kind of shape are they in to resist this subversion?
Well, at the moment, there are going to be presidential elections in Venezuela, and President Maduro believes that he has a lot of chances of winning, and that is his aim, no? To try to win the election and to try to mobilize the population to win the election, while the majority of the countries in the Americas are trying to challenge that election and trying to provoke a kind of unrest, or perhaps to boycott those elections. So I think it very much, the situation of Venezuela very much is linked with the outcome of those elections. No? If those elections will have a lot of popular support, it will boost Maduro. If it doesn't have popular support, it will help the opposition.
Who else would like to contribute? One of our other experts. You, sir?
Yes, so you were talking about parliamentary coups, and that seems to be the modern trend a little bit, rather than the traditional coup. As far as Honduras is concerned, of course, we did have a traditional coup there back in 2009, and it's interesting that we discovered from WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton and the State Department worked behind the scenes to ensure that the coup could not be reversed there. So there is certainly some support for that if the opportunity arises, although I think probably the United States is mostly taking a particular line. Well, they'll support what is going on if the opposition can organize something. However, I'm here kind of primarily to talk about Nicaragua.
Go ahead.
And Nicaragua is interesting because I don't know whether people are familiar with the history, but the Sandinista party, which overthrew the dictatorship of the Somoza family in 1979 and was in power in the 1980s, which was something of a cause célèbre whilst Ronald Reagan's government perpetrated a terrorist war by supporting a group called the Contras in the 1980s. The Sandinistas were forced into opposition in 1990, but they regained power in 2007. So over the last 10 years, we've seen a remarkable success story there in what is the second poorest country in the hemisphere, with poverty rates reduced from 48% in 2007 to 29.6 in 2014, according to the World Bank, and now, according to the Nicaraguan Central Bank, below 25%. Extreme poverty is down by about 60%. Nicaragua now ranks 6th in terms of gender equality in the world, having been 88th in 2007. But they've also done this whilst pursuing successful economic policies which integrate the country into the capitalist world in a reasonable way, and have managed not to antagonize the United States up until now. But this is now somewhat under threat under the current Trump administration, as a bill is currently going through Congress called the NICA Act, which, if it passes, will ensure that the United States votes against any loans to Nicaragua from international institutions such as the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank. And the United States, by convention, has a de facto veto over the decisions of these bodies. So in other words, if this goes through, the United States will be preventing investment in Nicaragua.
On what grounds? What's the pretext?
Well, this is interesting because they're claiming that Nicaragua is a dictatorship, despite repeated free and fair elections. And of course, this is total hypocrisy. We have the recent example of municipal elections in Nicaragua, which took place in November, which were observed by the Organization of American States, who congratulated the Nicaraguan government on very successful elections, whilst pointing out some flaws and making certain recommendations which have been adopted by the government. However, these elections were heavily criticized by the United States, and it's on that pretext that they're putting the NICA Act through. Meanwhile, in neighboring Honduras, we had a presidential election, which was widely regarded as being fraudulent, in which the leftist opposition candidate was comfortably ahead after 60% of the vote had been counted. Then the vote went secret for about 24 hours, after which, miraculously, the right-wing incumbent turned out to have won. But the United States recognized the election and called it a fully free and fair democratic election.
Now, is this all about Trump? The Obama presidency committed many crimes in other parts of the world. Do you regard it as having been a relatively benign presidency for Latin America and everything's changed with Trump or not?
Well, I think that's debatable. I mean, I tend to see American administrations being relatively continuous anyway. We have this idea that Democrats and Republicans in conventional terms tend to be very different, and if you sympathize with a left-wing position, you tend to prefer having a Democratic president. But in fact, Democrats have perpetrated all sorts of very unpleasant things in the rest of the world. So I think that the ideas which underpin American foreign policy tend to continue. I rather doubt that Trump personally has a huge amount of interest in Latin America, nor did Obama, apparently. But the State Department acts to continue American policy. Whether we're now seeing a change in direction, whether there will be greater level of intervention. I mean, I suspect that it will probably be intervention more behind the scenes rather than the overt action we saw in terms of support for coups in Chile or for the Contra war in Nicaragua and so on. But it could be that there is a step up. The NICA Act actually started under the Obama administration, but it was
as did the classification of Venezuela as terrorist.
Indeed, yes. So that continuity is there. It's really a question. The aims seem to be similar. It's a question of whether the United States changes its action, particularly to be slightly more interventionist in some way, or to push these things through a little bit more. Whereas under Obama, whilst the intention may have been there, nothing really seemed to happen.
In the lifetime of this show, this series, we had programs talking about, if not red Latin America, then pink. Rose-colored Latin America. Who will tell me how this all changed, that we are now back talking about trying to hold the tide against American intervention by whatever means necessary? A parliamentary coup if you can, a judicial coup if you can, a military coup if you can't. How did things turn around? Who's got a view on that? Yes, the lady in the middle.
Hi, I'm Gloria Gomez. I am from Aculco Radio, and I'm from Colombia. My view, I'm not on the left, I am not on the right, I'm more in the middle. And
just like me.
Perhaps, we have to talk about that. But I think, talking to the new generation in Latin America, I believe that the young people will change Latin America, because they are not so stupid. They are more educated. They are people who are with the media. They can see the real, what is going on in Latin America. I just come back from Colombia. I spent a few days in Barranca and in Bucaramanga. And what I see from Venezuela, people, educated people, begging in the streets, working for 10, 12 pounds a day, 10, 12 hours a day. And I think that democracy in Venezuela, personally, it's my belief, is not working. I think it's wrong. It's not social democracy.
What would be the alternative to democracy in Venezuela?
For me,
dictatorship in Venezuela?
No. For me, democracy is democratic. People choose. But in Venezuela, they cannot choose. They cannot say anything because...
How can you say that when I personally have been there during more elections and referenda?
Perhaps they take you to the wrong place. But what I work with...
No, I went anywhere I wanted. I'm talking about the numbers. There have been more, Madam, there have been more elections and referenda in the last 20 years in Venezuela than any other place on the earth.
I agree with you, but always Maduro wins. But that's not my issue. My issue is...
Your issue is with who wins?
No. My issue is why Venezuelan people, I work with Venezuela, I've been in Venezuela, why Venezuelan people lost everything, why Venezuela are begging, why children are dying, why we are sending medicine from Colombia, why people are crossing Barranca, Bucaramanga, and Cucuta every single day just to get a bag of food, toilet paper, medicine for the children. It shouldn't be happening. We Colombian people used to beg for visas to go to Venezuela to make money because Venezuela was the dream country for Colombia.
When was that?
That was in the 80s when I came to England.
The dictatorship period.
I'm not sure. I agree. I don't agree too much to the right.
I'm just thinking you've got a little...
No, I'm not confused at all.
A little sympathy.
No, Mr. Holloway, no at all. I believe, for me...
But you talk of a golden age in Venezuela, which happened to be a period of dictatorship.
Whatever, but that changed. I believe that we had to switch to the left. We need proper socialism, free education, free accommodation, free health or salute. That is proper socialism. But to tell people when to move, how to move, what to have and not to have, that is a dictatorship.
Well, you're quite right. You are neither left or right. You're absolutely centrist.
Yeah,
There'll be more of this after the break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, but discussing Latin America and, in particular, the new policy of intervention. Some might call it aggressive intervention in the affairs of the Latin American subcontinent. We took the كلمة camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Take a look at this.
America's been complaining that Russia's been intervening in their elections. Do you think that America has the right to intervene in foreign countries' elections?
Well, they've been doing it for quite some time to all sorts of various countries, haven't they? That's what I think. I don't know. Probably not. Like, no country should be intervening to another country's affairs, I think.
No, I don't think it would give them a right to intervene in other places. But I think America has been intervening in the affairs of other countries for a long time already. So if Russia is a guilty party in this case, then America is also a guilty party in many other cases. So it puts them on the same footing, sort of, so to say.
Do you think that America has the right to intervene in foreign countries' elections?
No, they should mind their business. Simple as that.
No, it doesn't give them the right to interfere in anybody's elections. America, no.
Yes.
And why is that?
Because America are trying to sort everything out. It's not really... I just think countries need help sometimes. So whether America's right or wrong, then we'll be wait and see. But I think they're trying to do good for the greater good rather than just doing it for the sake of it.
So you think that America's in that position to control other countries for their own good?
No, not for America's own good, but for the world's greater good. So sometimes they just need outside governance, really, or another opinion.
If they already have a problem with them interfering, why interfere yourself? That makes, you know?
Yeah. So do you think that just because the US is so big that they have a right to interfere with other smaller countries?
No, not at all. I just think it's unfair because, because they have more, power.
What a pity the only actual idiot on the streets of London was a Scotsman. How shameful. Now, let's continue with the debate with our experts and even enthusiastic amateurs. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Rafael Sanchez. I'm in fact from Europe, from Valencia, but I'm married to an Ecuadorian woman. And I've been in Ecuador several times and following Latin America's issue or social matters for a long time. Yes, I think, well, the Americans or USA doesn't have the right to intervene in Latin America, but they have been doing that for a long time, Well, independence of Latin America was held by British, and then when the Americans become very strong, they just after the Monroe Doctrine.
Let's just explain for the international audience the Monroe Doctrine. This essentially said that Latin America was the United States' backyard.
Yeah, that's it. That
no one else would be permitted.
Yeah, that's it. But I think it was president of the USA, and he was saying that America is for the Americans, and nobody else except USA is authorized to intervene in Latin Americans. So the result of that is Latin America has become the backyard of USA. And they've been doing that for a long time. But that's been successful because Latin America has been divided between the rich, the super rich, and the poor, indigenous, black, and that's what happened. They don't have a project in common. After the Caracazo and the Cochabamba in Venezuela and in Bolivia, people wanted to change. So a moment was reached where people just supported the progressive governments in those countries, but they want the support of the grassroots and the working class of people in the elections, and every time there is a coup d'etat or they try a coup d'etat by the support of the USA, they need to really involve the people in the changes. And people got demoralized with corruption as well, I think. I've seen people from Ecuador getting very demoralized in 10 years of Korea. Something we need to fight from the very first day when the progressive parties are in the government, They need to put in place some kind of ministry for transparency and to be very clear about all the business on the crony capitalism, because they will run crony capitalism in those countries. They won't run anything in that moment. So if there is no revolution and they change everything, they will have to deal with corruption, as well. Well, in any situation, because the mentality won't change from one day to another. People are really becoming dependent of China or Russia or other countries, and they are not becoming independent because the solution for Latin America is just to think of projects of Latin America together, not just Nicaragua, or not just Honduras, or not just Ecuador, all of them together. And they have a lot of potential. They have natural resources, they have agriculture, they have tourism, they have a lot of... so they need to use those resources to develop themselves. It won't be easy, but they have to try, I think.
Excellent, very interesting contribution. The gentleman in the white shirt.
My name is Mariano Garzón, President Creo Movimiento of Guillermo Lasso from Ecuador. Unfortunately, I must to tell you, Korea is no good president. The reason is too much corruption. And also, they discovered in the end, the election, the second voting, they discovered it was cheating the results because Guillermo Lasso, he was the winning president. Unfortunately, he has all the power in the government. And I am disagree as well, America is going in any country in Latin America because all countries, like Mrs. Gloria said, we are intelligent people now. We know about the situation because nobody's happy left the country to work in another country because it's 4.6 million Ecuadorian people no has job. It's unemployed. And for democracy, it's necessary to change every 4 years new president. Otherwise, they make the corruption any country around the world. So I'm talking about the Venezuelan people. It's 9 hours in the queue, try to cross the border between Colombia and Ecuador. If Maduro is excellent president, why the people left the country?
Well, because there's an economic war being waged against Venezuela by the United States.
I don't think so. That one is a good reason because it's very difficult. The people, when it got good economy, it's not necessary to leave the country.
No, but you can't have a good economy when the oil price is $50 or less, when it was 120 not so long ago, and when the most powerful country in the world and your biggest customer is engaged in economic warfare against you.
Yeah, but the situation is put this way. If you got good economy, you got job, it's not necessary to leave the country. It's no reason to any people just make 9 hours in the queue to pass the border in Ecuador. It's 9,000, 10,000 per day, try to cross. Well, some people is accept, because Ecuador as well, no is rich country, it's not good. But what happened, about the economy, of course it's rich because we are in plenty oil. But Correa is make another mistake. He sell the oil to China and Thailand until 2026, and the price was down. Doesn't matter what happened about the us. Now is, just give the Julian Assange in this embassy. It's not politics, but Correa just signed and just give like a asylum politician. So now, look, Great Britain, they try to do good business straight away with Ecuador, but politics always, it's not healthy to confront about the situation, because the Moreno.
So am I understanding you correctly? You think that Ecuador should hand Assange over to the United States?
No, because he applied for asylum politics. And it's no asylum politics. He's hacker. All the Ecuadorian people are still paying, the maintenance in the embassy.
Well, what are you paying for a bed for him to sleep in?
Sorry?
All he has is a bed to sleep in. What do you mean you're paying?
Well, you must to pay the food, everything. I don't think so.
No. He buys his own food.
Okay.
I get it. You're not happy that Ecuador is confronting the United States over Julian Assange. That's the long and the short of it. You're trying to cover that up, but that's actually what you are saying. However, let's take this gentleman here now. The issue of corruption never goes away. It is undoubtedly true that these pink revolutions, first of all, were not revolutions, because nothing totally changed in the society in which they happened, and corruption came in with them on their coattails. The only country where there's no corruption in Latin America is Cuba. That's the only revolution that there has been. Am I right or wrong?
I should answer. Well, I think there are many. There are many things we have to sort out. Just starting from the mainly beginning, the cultural part. I mean, we all are America. So when we refer to the U.S. And when they refer to the Americans, it's like we are a whole continent. That's from the mainly beginning. The second is corruption is coming from a whole system of economical structure that is situated in a political situation. And which country? You are going to tell me Britain is not corrupted? Europe
Britain's a capitalist country, and therefore it's corrupt.
For sure.
But Venezuela is supposed to be a revolution. So why is it corrupt?
Well, I'm Mexican. First of all, let me speak where I come from. As a Mexican, I can tell you since the mainly first part of the system till the last one is corrupted because of the position that a few people will have the power, and we can confront it here with people that does not agree with the left or the right. I mean, immediately we can reject them by telling them, you know what, is not right the way you're thinking, or it's not the left or it's not the right. But at the end of the day, people is not accepting their governments. It doesn't matter where they are positioned in between left, center, or right. Even though, I mean, I think my main point, and I just want to go a little bit back to the USA. they are trying to control all the system, and Europe as well by history, they're trying to control all the systems in Latin America. They never stopped. We're talking like if they left, but they never left. They never stopped. They are just trying to make it better, more articulated. And what we're facing now, and I think we should situate, and you already situated very well, like the open war they're trying to make with Venezuela, with one of our Latin American countries. I traveled in Latin America for 5-6 years. I traveled mostly of the countries, and I can tell you that it's very different to see a regime that they enter, the U.S. enter when you go to Honduras and you see what the USA made in Honduras, and then you go to Venezuela, and then there is a big difference. I mean, I was there when Hugo Chavez was, and I can tell you, I mean, people can complain about their presidents or the corruption, but at the end of the day, Venezuela was not Honduras, or Venezuela has not, and every life matters, but Venezuela has not the rate of death that is having my country because of the weapons of the U.S. Who is the people who is buying the oil from the Islamic State? Well, from the IS. It's companies from the U.S. The 50% are companies from the U.S. The next is Qatar, the next is Turkey. The only benefit from these wars is the lords of the war, and USA is the biggest terrorist support.
Biggest warlord. Let's take the gentleman here, then the lady in the middle.
This is Denis Rogatyuk, a Russian-Australian writer, journalist and political analyst. I wanted to bring the conversation a bit back to the situation in Venezuela. In particular, I wanted to remark upon, the fact, the real question is why has the United States finally resorted to a very real threat of a military invasion or a military intervention via Colombia or via its other allies in the region? And I believe that the main reason actually lies in the current state of the Venezuelan opposition. We have seen, over the last several years, the Venezuelan opposition basically adopting tactics of extremely violent tactics, but particularly during the protests of February 2014, and of course very violent protests last year. If we recall, in around April and May last year were some of the deadliest months in Venezuela. I think we were all harrowed and terrified by pictures and videos of Afro-Venezuelan men being set on fire by supporters of the Venezuelan opposition. The same Venezuelan opposition that was called peaceful opposition by CNN, BBC, by NBC and other medias, other communications.
I have to take a break. I promise you we'll come back to that. But the kind of a Venezuelan contra is very much in the making, in my opinion. We'll be right back. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on our Mayadeen television in London, talking about Latin America. We took the كلمة camera onto the streets of London to ask people what they thought about the intervention by the United States in the affairs of Latin America.
Do you think that Trump's wall will build better relations with their neighbors?
No, you don't build relationships by building walls. All you do is put up barriers between people, so, yeah.
Why build a wall? Yeah, why are you trying to isolate countries and then try and create like another judgment?
I think it's just cause like a lot of like war definitely. It's going to cause like a lot of problems in the future.
For the next generation, they're going to think it's okay to judge other people in their countries and separate it.
Trump's wall, do you think it will improve relations with other countries?
Not at all. I think it will cause a deterioration in the relations with many other countries.
The wall?
The wall.
No, I can't see how that's going to build better relationships with anybody. No, not at all.
So do you think that Trump's wall would improve their relations?
That's not a good idea. That's just silly.
No. It's tragic. It's just... I can't even comment on that. Like, it's beyond reason. I can't.
The U.S. Secretary is predicting that Venezuela will have a coup very soon. Do you think that this is possible?
Venezuela?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with the internal politics of Venezuela, I'm sorry to say.
I don't know. I really don't know.
I don't know anything about that, sorry.
Well, as we started out by describing, the wall is a one-way wall. It's to keep Latin America out of the north of the continent, but sadly not reciprocated, because the United States is back in a big way in Latin America. My audience here are seething with their different points of view, coming as they do from all parts of Latin America. And yes, the lady in the middle. Go ahead, madam.
Assalamu alaikum is a beautiful way that we honor each other in preoccupations about how we can handle things that we have inherited historically from systems that we can name it different ways: capitalism, social patriarchal order, all kinds of things that have dealt with corruption and war in a way that was not efficient. So as I met some women of Iraq, activists, walking through Trafalgar Square, as many people do talk face-to-face nowadays, places like this, forum, when people are looking for alternatives and connecting worldwide through the networks that we are creating in different ways. They said we have to basically have 50% of women in power right now all over the world before women take on that culture that has already failed us. And then by demanding that 50% representation in the world, which is pretty obvious, we'll deal with other inequalities that are historical. And then in the process of relentlessly dealing with the heritage of corruption that is embedded in the Latin systems we have in Latin America, that basically is a colonial heritage and a way in which we have administered the world inefficiently, we find alternative. We come out with alternative. A lot of energy has gone into looking at the bullies and how things have not worked out and how many bombs we can create and how many airplanes we can create from the distance to demand destruction of others. We are ourselves. So this time of walls and cells parting from each other in a decomposition of an organism that is affecting the ecology is for us to unite. We had attempts, European Union, Mercosur, Africa, all kinds of different things that we have attempted before with partial success. When we talk about pink revolutions, no offense to pink, given that it's the preference of color of little girls, and you understand that. Well, we have a purple revolution coming to place. And that is the one of our connectivity in different levels, in a spiritual level of nurturing earth, of being sensible. We have a lot of science that guides us in that direction. And our countries now, we're here debating perhaps who is being more bullied or who is more of a bully. All of us have failed to different degrees. And therefore, we thank and we forgive our ancestors for having done what they were capable of doing before. We have amazing heritage that have not been tapped in yet. Indigenous, amazing alchemical and chemistry from the forests combined with perhaps Persian and Japanese medicine will heal diseases when we communalize completely our means of healing our bodies and our resources that are all shared. So then, basically, research has to be communalized. Healthcare has to be free and communalized. Intelligence has to be put together in a way that we all minimize our usage of resources and maximize our intelligence and the beautiful, delightful way in which we are multicultural people in the world, having each other. South America, North America, Central America, we can even change such names because we are one people in the world. And that is the beauty of us, being our differences, uniting and showcasing what works. Therefore, women representation is a minimal effort that we can reach in the next couple of years, perhaps, to be able to have an alternative and then look at what will be the position of the world when war is gone, and then we're using our intelligence to actually connect to each other in a marvelous way that will be the wonderful ancestors of future generation. They'll be proud of us.
Well, thank you and welcome back. You are our spiritual advisor. I only make the point in parenthesis that I've known plenty of women warmongers. Margaret Thatcher launched plenty of wars, and some of the women leaders of the Labour Party before Jeremy Corbyn were positively foaming at the mouth for war. So I'm not sure that having a woman leader necessarily will change things for the better. The gentleman at the front.
Yes, my name is Will and I came from Venezuela. I would like to speak from the heart and just offer the point of view of the Venezuelans. Yes, Venezuela has been under an economic warfare. And what we see in the queues in every border is the effect of what is an economic warfare. An economic warfare, generally a war, destroy buildings, destroy houses, hospitals, bridges, destroy roads. And you see that in the pictures. An economic warfare, you don't see that. It's an abstract way of destruction. And it's a destruction of the value of the things. The value of your property, the value of your salary is destroyed, became meaningless. You cannot buy anything with that. And that means something. That means that your savings disappear. The work of your life disappear. And it's by a trick in the current change, induce inflation, blockading your access to credit, blockading your access to knowledge, basically intellectual property, blockading even your own accounts, bank accounts are blocked. Your own money, you cannot even use it. And that's why what is happening to Venezuela. Venezuela suddenly became poor, but it's immensely rich. We don't need to be begging. We are rich. We can pay everything we want. But has been denied to us the access to credit, the access to our own cash flow. And even the most essential things like purchasing medicines or purchasing food has been so much troubling because the purchase orders are rejected, not taken. Is going to Venezuela? No. Even ships or air flights, cargo flights that are depart to Venezuela are returned because the license of the air flight or the ship that need to go crossing the land or crossing the air is rejected, and then the fly have to land. And that has happened and it's amazing how such a level of blockade can be so effective and deprive us from the very essentials like medicines, even toilet paper. The most basic toiletry that dignify you are not there. And then how a government is so useless that cannot think about that and fix it for me. And you see, well, yes, it's the government's duty and responsibility to make this work because it's their responsibility. But you have to stand in the broader view. That is, you are not alone in this planet. You are in a table match that you need to play around. Why Venezuela is subject to such attack? And it's for one reason. When Venezuela led Latin America from 1999 up to 2005 into this wave of revolutionary governments being popular and rebrand socialism as a word that is worth to create a political project, and rebrand the left as an opportunity that many movements can enfranchise themselves and pursue the access to power legitimately, not by violence, but legitimately, the left became successful. And so successful were that we stopped United States at 2005 Mar del Plata, because that day the United States was about to fully take the whole standards that control import-export along all our countries by approving ALCA. The free trade agreement was a massive plan to just dismantle all the customs. And every ship from the United States will have free access to every country of us without any say on our side. So full access for them and not for us. President Chavez, Kirchner, Nestor Kirchner, President Lula, and many others stopped it. And that was very bad for the United States, because it was the last card for the United States to keep the supremacy on the planet and counteract China. And after that, their opportunity disappeared. So they need to recover that offensive. And the only way they can do that is by destroying Venezuela. And that's why we are under economic warfare. They cannot launch a military attack because they can use Venezuelan opposition as a tool to destroy the country from inside, and became a puppet, a very docile country to their prerogative of Washington. For the bad luck of the United States, the Venezuelan opposition is such an incompetent politician actor They are not able to articulate one single political project that are credible. They keep contradicting themselves. They keep fracturing themselves. There are no way how they can even sit down together around the same table. They keep making smaller and smaller groups. They were G28, then G10, then G4, then G1, because they cannot talk to each other. And with that, the opposition is supposed to rule the country, and they don't have any moral stance. The last thing they do, they start burning people on the streets and pretend that they were peaceful. Such a level of contradiction made them just faceless. They cannot stand in elections. They keep losing. And that is the reason why the Chavismo win. Because
well, that's why they're trying to destroy the upcoming presidential election.
Yes, they have to stop the election because it's obvious there is no candidate in the opposition to stand President Maduro with any credible card. The Venezuelan people just know all of them and say, you are just not worth the paper you are written.
You missed one point, as did I. One of the reasons why the oil price was driven down by overproduction by the United States' closest allies was precisely to damage the economies of Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. This was a deliberate ploy. There didn't suddenly sprout out of the ground so much oil that the price would fall. This was a deliberate political act of economic warfare.
And it's quite clever because you need to understand the context. At that time, that was 2013, China announced a reduction on the demand or the growth, the planned economic growth from 10% interannual growth down to 7%. So OPEC and Venezuela among them copy that trend, slowing down the production of oil. That was exactly the moment the United States ramped up the production of shale gas and flood the market and start a oil fight war with Saudi Arabia to take down the shale companies. And the price was very stable. OPEC was very well in control of the oil price up to November 2014. $100 a barrel, $95 a barrel. By February 2015, the price was 25.
Madam, yes, please.
Brazilian. My name is Ana Maria. I just like to get back a little bit to the point of when you were mentioning about corruption and, the justification of coup d'etat in Brazil, for example, using corruption. It's now more than clear, everyone knows, that was just really an excuse. And for what I understand, corruption have been used, is an issue that has been used for many governments that want to break democratic systems. So corruption is being used as an excuse, and in Brazil it was more than clear. Of course, always existed corruption in Brazilian government. I would say since the beginning, it's very, very difficult to deny. But the latest situation, what happened last year with the coup, the justification of corruption being the main tool that was really disorganizing and destroying Brazil was obvious. One of the most ridiculous, if you see now what's going on, arguments that were used. And how, for example, I see it now, like Brazil has had with Lula the best government. The PT in Brazil had been the best one, the economy of Brazil, we know Brazil could reach, I think it was the 5th or 6th economy in the world, and everything was going very well. So all the dream of having a democratic Brazil was being realized. And we forget a lot of time to remember how the process of the destructive process against the democracy in Brazil growing happened, of course, much more thanks to the media and who is behind the media, and then come all this idea that we have, that definitely proves the invasion, the American invasion in Latin America. Of course, the media is an enormous power working together. And it's not the first time. We know that we always have been colonized for one way or another, especially by Americans. And the American never gave up of colonizing Latin America.
No, and this is the point the young gentleman at the front was also making.
Exactly.
We shouldn't say that they're back, because they never
yes.
away. More of this after the break. This is Kalima Horra with me, George Galladay, discussing Latin America. The last segment now. Let's get as many speakers in as we can. Yes, the gentleman on the end. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dennis Bartholomew. I'm a member of Caribbean Labour Solidarity, a UK-based organisation. But in a previous life, I was the trade officer for the revolutionary government of Grenada. And I've seen some of the tools that are being used now having been used against Grenada. And what you find is that America will use all types of weapons to get to its end. In the case of Grenada, the revolution was very successful, reduced illiteracy, brought about benefits for women, including maternity leave and so on. And although Grenada was very small and was facing this major enemy, it was incredibly successful. It had a number of positive reports of all organizations, the World Bank and IMF. But using internal splits within the revolution, the United States was able to invade. And what do we have some 35 years later? America using other methods to keep control of the Caribbean and of the region. The problem it now faces is a burgeoning China. I've recently come from Jamaica, and I've seen the inroads being made by the Chinese under their Belt and Roads policies in Jamaica. And it's received locally a mixed reception. People are very wary about colonization from whatever source. But the Chinese have come in. The Chinese are not coming in with warships. They're coming in with development grants, which on the face of it are beneficial and on the face of it are fair. So you've got a situation of Big Brother from the north with a big stick, and you've got the Chinese giving certain benefits in their trading relations. The Chinese are not doing this because they suddenly woke up one day and are feeling great. They're doing this for sound political and economic reasons. So you've got this situation unfolding in the Caribbean and in the Americas. And I don't know whether the United States is going to win. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out.
My money would be on the Chinese, actually, rather than Donald Trump. Madam, I cut you short earlier. Please have a brief contribution. Yes.
I'm talking about the corruption. One of the main problems in Latin America is big corruption. I don't think we want to be dominated by the North America people or North America government, but one of the main problems is the Latin American presidents, especially in Colombia, is run by 10 families and other countries. And as long as the countries are run by their own families, protecting their own economy, Latin America is still under their own presidents, who are not chosen by us, by the USA, who choose you are going to be the president for the next 4 years, and is for the next 20 or 30 years. People like me, for example, study politics. I will never have a chance, not even to carry their handbag for the president, because I will never be unaware of that. So, and as long as the government buys the mass media, like in Colombia, Santos owns RTI, in Ecuador owns TVs, so we don't have a chance. And when somebody put a video on Facebook or something, in 10 minutes, cut. So that is the main problem. So as long as that is no changes, Latin America is still under under America. And so I think we, Latin American people, should be looking, our children, our grandchildren, we should teach them, this is the situation, watch out. Yep. So, Mr. Trump, goodbye, we don't want you. That's the answer.
That's a good line to end on. The gentleman in front of you, I cut him short too. I want to give him another couple of minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Actually, I was continuing on what Compañero here was saying with regards to the Venezuelan opposition. I just wanted to give just a brief sort of outlook as to the reason why the United States has now basically chose to go with the road of military intervention is that because Venezuelan opposition has proven to the people and to the outside world that what they basically are is a gang of criminals and murderers. Because let's go down by names.
No, don't do that, because the international audience, these names will mean nothing to them, and we only have a few minutes left.
So basically, most they have been they have organized terrorist. They have organized and supported terrorist attacks. They have organized the construction of barricades, like guarimbas. They have asked previously for a military intervention from the United States.
They formally asked for it, and now the United States is getting ready to offer it in one form or another.
Exactly. So the Venezuelan nation has recognized that the opposition has absolutely zero credibility. That is why at the Constituent Assembly elections last year, such a mass amount of people participated. This is why the Bolivarian political forces won the majority of governorships in the regional elections last year. It is because on left and right, opposition supporters and Chavistas, they have recognized that the right-wing opposition has absolutely nothing to offer them. So now the only road to regime change in Venezuela is a military intervention.
Yeah. Let's take the Brazilian lady again. Armed intervention against Venezuela is formally on the table. I have postulated that the pitiful incompetence of the judicial coup government in Brazil may very well mean that the same club has to be used in Brazil, because Madam Lula otherwise will be the next president, because he was the greatest president. And because he was the greatest, he cannot be allowed to come back. Am I right?
Exactly. Not only because he was the greatest for Brazil, but because he was the greatest also for the United States. I mean, in my conception, I don't think it's only mine. No one can take, more attention than there is a narcissist way as well, I think, in the American government. What is happening now, for example, with Trump? We know people hate him, but probably because he's a sort of star. I don't know. Being accepted for me is a phenomenon. And I think in Brazil, we got with Lula an international repercussion. We got much, much more looked at than in any other government. And Lula is very strong as a politician and also as a human being. The way not only he deals with politics, but the way he can represent the poor people, the class that, the capitalism hates, is a threat. He represents this threat. So Lula would never be allowed to become president again.
Three leaders were mentioned, Chavez, Kirchner and Lula. Two of them are dead, unexpectedly, I may say. And Lula is on his way to prison if they succeed. So you can see that these three individuals are no longer with us, except Lula is still alive and might come back if the movement is big enough. Isaac, I want you to sum up for us in the last moments. I, like you, have been around a long time. I watched and prayed and agitated against the bloody coup in Chile. I was even in Grenada fighting to try and stop the overthrow of the New Jewel movement there. I spent the best years of my life in Nicaragua in the 1980s before the victory of the Contra and the right-wing backlash there. I've been so many times to Venezuela and seen great victories, and now we are facing a potential Armageddon in Venezuela. Am I right to feel pessimistic right now? Can the masses bounce back?
I think that we are entering a very conflictive situation in Latin America. Trump is polarizing, and the fact that he's polarizing, it could become like a boomerang to him. Because with Obama, at least, he tried to conciliate, and he achieved some changes. No? He achieved that Kirchner laws, no? the changes in Brazil. But Trump, with his new policy, he's polarizing. And he could create the opposite effect. He could create radicalization in the population. For example, in the case of Peru, now we have, in the last 2 months, 5 very big demonstrations against the Peruvian government, against the release of Fujimori. And I think that if the United States is pushing for a military intervention in Venezuela, many peoples in the continent are going to do uprisings. The fact that in Brazil, the most popular candidate is not allowed to stand in elections, which is Lula, no, is going to affect the credibility of the system. Already we have this week a lot of very, very big demonstrations in Argentina and the strikes. So if Trump pushed more and harder, he could have the opposite effect. And I think that it might be the case in the next months or even years.
Sometimes the enemy struggles mightily to lift a huge stone only to drop it on its own feet. Let's hope that's what comes of this new aggressive interventionism by Donald Trump. It's by no means certain either way. The one thing we learn from history is that nobody learns from history. And the popular struggles that were successful for a time and have now been rolled back may come again, may have their time again. But I insist on this point as I have the pulpit. Next time, if there is a next time, it has to be a real revolution. There's no point in calling something a revolution if it isn't a revolution, because if you leave your enemies armed and dangerous, if you leave levers of power in their hands, then don't be surprised if they use them. The reality is, as I said earlier, in Cuba there was a real revolution, and the disinherited moved their casinos and their bordellos to Miami and elsewhere in the United States. They were not left to continue their subversion and their counter-revolutionary politics and subversion, economic and political subversion. That's the only way, it seems to me. One of the great ironies, as someone I say has been to Venezuela many times, is that there are people out on the street who think that Venezuela is some kind of dictatorship, when nothing could be further from the truth. You may have seen my now quite well-viewed altercation at the Oxford Union with a young man who was telling me that the opposition had no access to television in Venezuela, when I had just with my own eyes been watching the opposition on the television all day, channel after channel after channel after channel. It may be that we have to say that people whose allegiance is to the United States and not to their own country, whose purpose is the enrichment of themselves and the impoverishment of the others in their own country, cannot at the same time expect political and economic freedom to do so. That would be a revolution. This has been Kalima Hurra, and you have been a wonderful audience. It's been marvelous. Thanks for watching.